I only intended to cancel a single credit card, but the receipt for the hotel suite unraveled an entire web of lies. They thought I was the nobody wife they could mock right at the dinner table. They were wrong. Within 30 days, I would become the person holding the keys to the house they called their legacy. And the biggest shock of all was that her pregnancy bump never even existed. My name is Bryn Calloway, and at 32 years old, I had learned that silence in the Whitaker household was never peaceful. It was predatory. The air inside their Newport estate always smelled of old money and stale judgment. We were seated in the dining room, a cavernous space where the crystal chandelier cost more than the entire house I grew up in. Cynthia Whitaker sat at the head of the table, swirling her glass of Cabernet. She looked at me with that tight, stretched smile that never reached her eyes. "You know, Bryn," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "I was telling my friends about your little job. It is so quaint how you work so hard. In our circle, women usually focus on legacy, not labor." Before I could respond, her hand twitched. It was a calculated movement, sharp and precise. The crystal goblet tipped over, sending a dark crimson wave cascading down the front of my cream silk dress. The liquid soaked through to my skin, cold and sticky. "Oh my," Cynthia gasped, pressing a napkin to her mouth without a shred of guilt in her eyes. "How clumsy of me. But really, dear, that dress. It looks like a polyester blend anyway. It should wash right out." I looked at my husband, Graham. He was cutting his steak, not even looking up at me. "Graham," I said, my voice tight. He sighed, finally glancing at the stain spreading across my chest like a wound. "Don't make a scene. Bryn, it is just wine. Go clean up. Mother didn't mean it." He did not offer me a napkin. He did not scold his mother. He just chewed his steak. I stood up, my chair scraping harsh against the floor, and walked to the powder room down the hall. My hands were shaking, not from the cold wine, but from the humiliation burning in my throat. I locked the door and reached for a towel. That was when my phone buzzed against the marble counter. It was a notification from my banking app. Transaction alert, high value. I unlocked the screen. The glow illuminated my pale reflection in the mirror. Harborcrest Suites. Presidential suite. Duration 2 nights. Total $4,800. My stomach dropped. The card used was the Onyx Black card ending in 4029. Cynthia's card. The card Graham had begged me to co-sign for because his mother was having temporary liquidity issues with the family trust. He had called it a gesture of family unity. I had called it a financial risk, but I signed the guarantee anyway because I wanted them to accept me. I tapped for details, waiting for the data to load. Room service pre-order. Late night roses. Vintage Dom Perignon. Guest name Paisley Monroe. The air left my lungs. Paisley Monroe. The woman Graham swore was just a consultant for the hospitality group. The woman who liked all his photos and always seemed to be at the same conferences. Cynthia was not staying in that suite. She was sitting in the dining room insulting my dress. She had used the card I guaranteed to book a romantic getaway for my husband and his mistress. I stared at the phone. The humiliation vanished, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was just the wallet they could drain while they laughed at my expense. I wiped the wine from my skin with a rough paper towel. I did not cry. I smoothed my ruined dress and walked back to the dining room. As I approached the archway, I saw them. Graham was checking his phone, a small, secret smile playing on his lips. Cynthia was leaning in, whispering something that made them both chuckle. They looked like conspirators celebrating a successful heist. I walked in and sat down. "All better?" Graham asked, his tone bored. "You really should be more careful with your reactions." "I will be," I said softly. I kept my hand under the table, holding my phone. I opened the app again. My thumb hovered over the image of the sleek black card. If they use my credit to betray me, I will cut their oxygen. I did not hesitate. I tapped the button labeled Freeze Card. The screen flashed a confirmation status frozen. All future transactions declined. I locked my phone and placed it face down on the tablecloth. I picked up my fork and looked at Cynthia, who was watching me with amusement. "This steak is delicious," I said. The trap was set. They just didn't know they were already caught. The drive home was suffocating. Graham gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, his jaw tight as he lectured me for the third time since we left the estate. You really embarrassed her." "Bryn," Graham said, shaking his head. "She just wanted to give a toast, and you ran off like a child. It was just wine. You know she has tremors sometimes." I stared out the passenger window at the passing streetlights. Tremors. She threw the glass. "Graham." She looked me in the eye and dropped it. "You are being paranoid." He snapped. "God, you are so difficult sometimes." He slowed down for a red light. As the car idled, his right hand slipped off the gear shift and slid down to his lap. The glow of his phone screen illuminated his chin from below. He was typing fast, his thumb moving in a blur. "Who are you texting at 10 at night?" I asked. He jumped, shoving the phone face down into the cup holder. "Work, crisis management. The venue in Cabo is having a supply chain issue. I have to handle it." "Right," I said. Cabo. I did not fight him. I did not scream. Energy spent on anger is energy wasted, and I needed every ounce of my focus for what came next. When we pulled into the driveway of our suburban home, the one I paid the mortgage on while he claimed he was reinvesting his salary, I went straight upstairs. "I am going to bed," Graham called out, already heading for his study. "Do not wait up. I have to make some calls." I closed the bedroom door and locked it. I did not go to bed. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I was not a wife anymore. I was an auditor. I pulled up the credit card statement again. I exported the data from the last 24 months into a spreadsheet. The patterns emerged almost immediately. It was a map of betrayal drawn in dollars and cents. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the last 6 months. There was a charge on Cynthia's black card at a bistro called the Red Velvet. Those were the exact nights Graham claimed he had late board meetings. There were spa treatments booked for 2 people. There were jewelry purchases from a boutique that I had never set foot in. They were sloppy. They assumed I would never look because the card was in Cynthia's name, but they forgot that as the guarantor. I had full administrative access to the back-end data. My mind drifted back to the week before our wedding. Graham had slid a thick document across the table. A prenuptial agreement. "It is just standard family policy, babe," he had said, giving me that boyish, charming smile. "Dad insists. It protects the Whitaker legacy." The terms were brutal. If we divorced, I would leave with nothing but what I came in with. No claim to the Whitaker estate, no alimony. They wanted to ensure the gold digger got 0, but I had sent it to my own lawyer, June Holloway. We had added a single, dense paragraph on page 42 under breach of faith. It stated that if either party was found to be committing material fraud or exploitation of spousal financial resources to fund an extramarital affair, the entire agreement would be voided. Furthermore, the injured party would be entitled to immediate reimbursement of all misused funds with interest. I picked up my phone and dialed June. It was late, but she picked up on the second ring. Bryn June's voice was crisp. "Open the file." I said, "I want everything clean. Get the invoices, pull the GPS data from the car, and I want the security footage from the hotel if you can get a subpoena. No entrapment. I do not need to trick them. Just record exactly what they are doing." "Consider it done," June said. "Are you safe?" "For now," I replied. "But June, there is something else." I looked back at the hotel invoice on my screen. I had expanded the special requests tab for the presidential suite booking. There, typed in plain text, was a note from the concierge system. Guest requests hypoallergenic, pregnancy-friendly pillows and extra towels. My hand hovered over the mouse. Pregnancy-friendly. Paisley Monroe was faking a pregnancy. Or at least, she was staging the environment for it. It was the oldest trap in the book to secure a ring. I copied the hotel name Harborcrest Suites. The name sounded familiar. I opened a new tab and logged into my Bloomberg terminal. I searched the parent company. Harborcrest Hospitality Group. The financial indicators flashed red. They were leveraged to the hilt. Their debt was being packaged as high risk and was about to be sold off on the secondary market by a bank that wanted to clear its books before the quarter ended. A cold smile touched my lips. Graham and his mother loved that hotel chain. They considered it their home away from home. I did not cry. Tears were for people who had no options. I had capital. I created a new folder on my encrypted drive. I did not name it divorce. I typed in the only name that mattered. Operation Black Card. I had 30 days to buy their debt. By the time they realized what was happening, I would not just be the woman they cheated on. I would be their landlord. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse suite of the Kestrel building in downtown Chicago. I stepped out, the heels of my shoes clicking sharply against the polished concrete floor. To the Whitaker family. I was a mid-level data analyst at a boring logistics firm, a job they considered quaint and utterly forgettable. They never bothered to Google the company. If they had, they would have realized that Kestrel Meridian Systems was not a logistics firm. It was a high-frequency algorithmic trading and asset management platform, and I was not an employee. I was the founder and chief executive officer. I walked past the reception desk where my assistant, David, stood up immediately. "Good morning, Ms. Calloway," he said. "Marcus and Elena are waiting in the conference room as you requested. I cleared your schedule for the next 3 hours. Thank you." "David," I said, not breaking stride. "Bring us the unredacted financials on Whitaker Hospitality. And coffee. Black." I pushed open the double glass doors to the boardroom. Marcus, my CFO, and Elena, the head of our legal department, were already seated. They looked up as I entered. I did not sit down. I walked to the head of the table and threw a file onto the glass surface. "We are pivoting our acquisition strategy for the quarter," I said, my voice steady. "We are going hunting." Marcus opened the file and frowned as he scanned the documents. "Whitaker Hospitality Bryn. This is a mid-cap leisure group with terrible margins. Why are we interested? Their books are a mess. Because I know where the bodies are buried," I said, "and I want to buy the graveyard." Marcus typed something into his laptop, projecting the financial health of my husband's family empire onto the main screen. The graphs were a sea of red ink. "You are right," Marcus muttered. "They are beautiful on the outside, but they are hollow. They are borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. Look at this leverage ratio. They have taken out high-interest loans to cover operating costs for the last 2 quarters. They are inflating their revenue projections by at least 15% to keep the banks happy." Elena chimed in, tapping her tablet. "And there is something else. They use our legacy software, Kestrel Lite, for their room pricing models. They are 5 months behind on their licensing fees. We were about to send them to collections." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Do not send it to collections. Send them a notice of breach. Enforce the suspension clause. If they do not pay in full within 48 hours, cut their access to the pricing server. Let their system go dark. That will cripple their operations during the holiday rush." Elena warned. "It is aggressive. It is contractual." I corrected her. "Now, for the main course. I want to establish a shell entity. Call it Pinegate Capital. Register it in Delaware. Use it to purchase the distressed debt Whitaker Hospitality has floating on the secondary market. The banks are trying to offload it before the fiscal year ends. We buy it all." Marcus looked at me, his eyes widening as he realized the scope of what I was doing. "Bryn, if we hold their debt, we control their cash flow. We could force them into administration. Keep looking, I said. There is a specific tranche of debt I want you to find. It is a private equity loan taken out 4 years ago. Marcus scrolled through the data, his eyes darting back and forth. Then he stopped. Here it is, he said slowly. It is a collateralized loan for $2.4 million. It is listed as a business expansion loan, but the collateral isn't a hotel. He looked up at me. The collateral is a residential property in Newport, Rhode Island. The deed is in the name of Cynthia Whitaker. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Cynthia had always bragged that the Newport house was free and clear, a fortress that no one could touch. She had lied. She had mortgaged her legacy to fund her lifestyle. Buy it, I commanded. Buy the note. I want to own the paper on that house. Bryn, Elena said softly. If Pinegate owns that mortgage and they miss a payment, then we foreclose. I finished. They gave me the key to their destruction. I am just turning it. I walked over to the window and looked out at the Chicago skyline. I thought of Graham and his mistress in that hotel suite, laughing at me. I thought of Cynthia spilling wine on my dress. I turned back to the table where a framed photo of Graham and me sat near my phone. I reached out and slowly placed it face down on the wood. Execute the trades, I said. From now on, I am not a wife. I am a creditor. It was Memorial Day weekend, the single most profitable stretch of the year for the hospitality industry. The Whitaker resorts were booked to 100% capacity. They needed everything to be perfect to maintain the illusion of seamless luxury. But at exactly 9 a.m, the Kestrel Meridian servers executed the command I had authorized. The connection was severed. In an instant, the Whitaker hospitality reservation system went black. According to the live reports my team was monitoring, chaos erupted within minutes. At the flagship hotel in Miami, the check-in line stretched out the door. Guests were screaming because their reservations had vanished from the screens. The key card encoders stopped working. Housekeeping lost access to the room status logs, meaning they had no idea which rooms were dirty and which were clean. I watched the fallout through the reports from my private investigator, who was sitting in the lobby of the Newport property. Winston Whitaker, my father-in-law, was in the lobby, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He was not helping. He was screaming at a 22-year-old front desk manager. I do not pay you to stand there and look stupid, Winston shouted, his voice cracking. Fix it, or you are done. Get out of my sight. He fired the girl on the spot. He fired the IT director 5 minutes later. He was decapitating his own workforce right when he needed them most, pushing the internal structure from crisis into total anarchy. My phone vibrated on my desk. It was Graham. He had sent a text message. I read it, and a chill went down my spine. Not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of it. Turn the system back on. Consider it payback for the last 2 years. He did not ask how I was. He did not apologize. In one sentence, he admitted exactly what I was to them. I was not a wife or a partner. I was a transaction. They had allowed me to be in their family for 2 years, and now they expected me to pay the service fee. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the message and saved it to the Operation Black Card folder. It was evidence of harassment and an attempt to improperly influence a vendor. A moment later, Elena walked into my office. She looked pale. Bryn, she said. We found something else. When the system went down, it dumped a cache of raw data from their local servers to ours, the numbers they manually inputted for their bank audits. They are statistically impossible. Explain, I said. They are claiming 90% occupancy on Tuesdays in February, Elena said, sliding a paper across my desk. But the housekeeping logs show only 30% of the rooms were serviced. They are fabricating revenue to secure their loans. This is bank fraud. I looked at the data. It was blatant. They were cooking the books to keep the cash flowing. We have a fiduciary duty, I said calmly. If we know our client is using our software to generate false reports for a federally insured bank, we are liable if we say nothing. Send the report. To whom Elena asked. To the risk control department of their primary lender. I replied, do not editorialize. Just send the raw data with a note saying we found discrepancies during our termination audit. Let the bank draw their own conclusions. They will pull the credit line immediately, Elena said. It will kill the company. They killed it themselves. I said, send it. At 4 p.m. The final piece of the trap snapped into place. My shell company, Pinegate Capital, successfully closed the deal on the secondary market. I now owned the $18.7 million of distressed debt attached to the Whitaker portfolio. And because I owned the debt, and because I had proof of financial mismanagement via the fraudulent data, I had the right to trigger the acceleration clause. I signed the demand letter. It was simple. It stated that due to breach of contract and evidence of insolvency, the lender was calling in the full amount of the loan, immediately. I watched the security camera feed from the gate of the Newport mansion on my laptop. A courier van pulled up. The driver handed a thick envelope to the housekeeper, who walked it inside to the sunroom where Cynthia was trying to relax with a gin and tonic. I watched Cynthia tear open the envelope. She pulled out the letter. She read the first line. Then she read the number $18.7 million. No, she whispered, her lips moving in a way I could read clearly even through the grainy video. This is not possible. Her hand started to shake. It shook so hard that the paper rattled like a dry leaf in a storm. She dropped the glass of gin. It shattered on the expensive tile, but she did not even flinch. She just stared at the letter, finally realizing that the ground beneath her feet was gone. I closed my laptop. The first domino had fallen. Now, I would watch the rest of them collapse. The conference room at Kestrel Meridian Systems was designed to intimidate. It was all glass, steel, and a view of the Chicago skyline that cost a fortune to maintain. I watched the video feed from my office next door. The Whitaker family had been waiting for 45 minutes. Cynthia was pacing, her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. She checked her diamond watch for the 10th time. This is ridiculous, Cynthia hissed. Where is that useless wife of yours? You said she works in this building. She should be here to bring us water or at least tell these people who we are. She works in data entry. Mother, Graham muttered, rubbing his temples. She probably cannot even get access to this floor. Stop asking about her. We have to focus on the CEO, Winston, my father-in-law. Sat slumped in a chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. If they do not turn the system back on today, we lose the holiday revenue. We are dead in the water. I checked the clock. It was time. I signaled my assistant. David, send them in. No, I will go to them. I walked to the double doors of the boardroom. I smoothed my blazer, took a deep breath, and pushed them open. The room went silent. Cynthia looked up, her face twisting into a sneer that faltered halfway when she saw me. Bryn, she asked, her voice shrill with disbelief. What on earth are you doing here? We are waiting for the chief executive. Get out before you embarrass us further. Go fetch some coffee if you want to be useful. I did not answer. I walked past them to the head of the long obsidian table. I did not pull out a chair for them. I pressed a button on the console, and the smart glass wall behind me turned opaque, displaying the company logo and my name in 3-foot-tall letters. Bryn Calloway founder and chief executive officer Graham froze. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. No, Graham whispered, backing away until his legs hit a chair. No. That is impossible. You told me you process shipping logs. I told you I work in logistics and systems. I corrected him, my voice calm and steady. I manage high-frequency trading algorithms and debt restructuring systems. I founded Kestrel 7 years ago. I kept it quiet because I wanted a husband who loved me for me, not for my net worth. Clearly, that was a bad investment. Winston stood up, his hands shaking. You are the one who cut our systems. You are destroying your own family. I am protecting my assets, I said. And speaking of assets, let me introduce you to your new creditor. I clicked the remote. The logo for Pinegate Capital appeared on the screen, linked directly to the Kestrel parent structure. Pinegate is a wholly owned subsidiary of Kestrel Meridian, I explained, which means I own your debt. All $18.7 million of it. And since you are in default, I am calling it in. You cannot do this, Graham stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. We have a prenup. You cannot touch family assets. I am not touching them as your wife, I said, leaning forward, placing my hands flat on the table. I am seizing them as your lender. But since you brought up the marriage, let us look at why we are really here. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed. It was not a spreadsheet this time. It was an email thread recovered from Graham's corporate account. The subject line read, Exit Strategy. The text, written by Graham to his lawyer, was projected in high definition for the whole room to see. We just need to hold on for 6 more months. Bryn is just a placeholder until the trust fund vests. Once Mom books the suite for me and Paisley, we will have the grounds to file and cut Bryn loose without a payout. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb, a placeholder. I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air like a guillotine blade. That is fake, Cynthia shrieked, her face turning blotchy. You fabricated that my son would never. Did I fabricate this too? I asked. I pulled up the next slide, the receipt from the Harbor Crest Suites, the charge to the black card, and highlighted in yellow, the special concierge request. Guest Paisley Monroe. Request pregnancy-friendly pillows and non-alcoholic champagne. You used the credit card I guaranteed to book a celebration for your mistress's fake pregnancy, I said, my eyes locking onto Graham. You made me finance my own betrayal. Graham looked down at the table, unable to meet my gaze. His arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that he had underestimated me for 2 years. Bryn, please, Graham started, his voice cracking. We were just talking. It meant nothing. She isn't even. It cost $18.7 million, I said coldly. That is not nothing. I stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. I am not destroying you. Graham, I said, looking at the 3 of them, the people who had mocked my clothes, my background, and my worth. I am just stopping the payments on your delusions. I am done propping up your fake lives. I turned my back on them and walked out the door. Security will escort you out. I called back over my shoulder. Do not steal the pens. They are expensive. Graham thought he had played an ace card. 10 minutes after I kicked them out, the security desk called to say the Whitakers were demanding re-entry, this time with a vital witness. I allowed it. I wanted them to fire every bullet they had so I could show them the gun was empty. The door opened, and Graham walked in, guiding Paisley Monroe with a protective hand on her lower back. She was wearing a beige knit dress that clung to a very prominent, very round stomach. She looked at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, playing the role of the fragile victim to perfection. Bryn. Please, Graham said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. I know you are angry about the money, but Paisley she is stressed. It is bad for the baby. Can we just be adults about this? Paisley rubbed her belly. I didn't want to come here, she said, her voice trembling. But Graham said you were trying to ruin the family's future. I sat back in my leather chair and tented my fingers. I am not here to discuss feelings. I am here to verify liabilities. And since Graham claims this pregnancy is the reason for the $18.7 million debt restructuring, I need to verify the asset. I nodded to the private investigator standing in the corner. He stepped forward and placed a thin blue folder on the table. We ran a verification on the medical documents you submitted to the Whitaker Family Trust to secure your housing allowance, I said. Paisley stiffened. That is private medical information. It is fraud, I said simply. The clinic listed on your invoices, Bayside Maternal Wellness, does not exist. The address corresponds to a dry cleaning business in a strip mall. The doctor who signed your ultrasound report, Dr. Eris Thorne. He lost his license 4 years ago and currently resides in a federal penitentiary for insurance fraud. Graham let go of Paisley's arm. He looked at me, then down at the folder. What are you talking about? I went to the appointments. I waited in the car. You waited in the car, I repeated flatly. Did you ever go inside? Did you ever see a machine? I flipped the folder open. Projected onto the smart glass wall was the ultrasound image Paisley had posted on Instagram, the one Graham had framed on his desk. Next to it was a screenshot from a stock photography website. The metadata does not lie, I said. This image was purchased for $12.99. It has been used in 342 different articles, mostly for advertisements selling prenatal vitamins. Unless your child is a genetic clone of a stock photo from 2019. That is not your baby. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Graham turned slowly to look at Paisley. His face was a mask of pure horror. Paisley Graham asked, his voice shaking, "Tell her she is lying. Show her the real papers." Paisley took a step back. The tears vanished. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit. Winston slammed his hand on the table. You brought a con artist into our books. You let a stranger access the family accounts. We can fix this, Cynthia interrupted, her voice high and desperate. She looked at me. Bryn, darling, listen, we can make a private deal. We will sign whatever you want. Just do not release this to the shareholders. If they find out Graham was duped by a fake pregnancy, the stock will crash. I am not interested in a deal, I said, standing up. Here is the reality. You have 24 hours to self-report the financial discrepancies to the bank and admit to the attempted fraud. If you do not, I will exercise my right as the primary creditor to accelerate the debt and seize the collateral. You cannot do that, Paisley screamed, her composure cracking completely. He promised me. He said we would be married before the holiday season. He said his wife was a gullible idiot who would sign anything. Graham flinched as if he had been slapped. You said you loved me, he whispered. You said we were building a family. I was building a retirement fund, Paisley snapped. And you were the easiest mark I have ever seen. Realizing she had said too much, Paisley panicked. She grabbed her purse from the table and turned to run. But in her haste, the strap caught on the armrest of the heavy chair. The bag ripped open. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, spilling its contents across the gray carpet. Makeup, cash, a heavy silicone prosthetic belly that looked terrifyingly realistic, and a plastic wallet that burst open. I walked around to the table and knelt down. Graham stood frozen, unable to move. I picked up the plastic wallet. 3 identification cards had slid out. The first one was a driver's license from Ohio. The photo was Paisley, but the name read Sarah Jenkins. The second was a passport from Canada. The photo was Paisley, but the name read Elena Voronova. The third was a state ID from Florida. The name was Monica Reed. I held the cards up so Graham could see them. The woman he had destroyed our marriage for did not even exist. Paisley Monroe has left the building, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. But Sarah, Elena, and Monica left a lot of evidence behind. I looked at the silicone belly on the floor, then up at my husband. Congratulations, Graham, I said. It's a bouncing baby. Lie. Cynthia Whitaker decided that if she could not beat me in the boardroom, she would try to destroy me in the ballroom. By Tuesday morning, the gossip columns of the Newport Observer were running headlines painting her as the victim of a predatory scam. She claimed I was a gold-digging corporate raider who had manipulated her fragile son and entrapped the family to seize their ancestral home. She played the part of the confused, elderly matriarch perfectly to the press, conveniently forgetting the iron grip she held on her social circle. I did not give interviews. I did not cry on camera. I simply forwarded the links to June Holloway. "Send the letter," I told June over the phone. "Attach the video file from the dining room security feed, the one where she looks directly at the camera, smiles, and drops the wine on me. Malice aforethought. If she says one more word about me being a con artist, we sue for defamation of character and release the footage to the national networks." The gossip stopped 3 hours later, but the silence in the press was deafening compared to the noise inside Whitaker Hospitality. The compliance report I had sent to the bank triggered an immediate audit from the board of directors. They needed a scapegoat to appease the shareholders, and they were not going to sacrifice themselves. Graham was the first casualty. I received the update from my source inside the company. Graham was summoned to the executive suite and stripped of his title as Vice President of Operations. For the first time in his life, his last name did not protect him. His own father, Winston, sat at the head of the table and watched as security escorted Graham out of the building. "I am sorry, son," Winston had reportedly said, saving his own skin. "But someone has to take the fall for the irregular accounting." Graham was cut loose, drifting in the wind without a salary or a title. I almost felt pity for him. Almost. Then came the message I did not expect. It appeared on my encrypted chat app from an unknown number. "I know where the real ledger is. I want out." It was Tessa Whitaker, Graham's 24-year-old sister, the one who spent her life ignoring me at family gatherings, treating me like invisible furniture. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop on the edge of the city, far from the country clubs. Tessa looked tired. She wore no makeup, and her hands were trembling around a paper cup. "I do not want an apology," I said, sitting down opposite her. "I want actionable intelligence." "I do not have an apology to give," Tessa said, her voice low and scratchy. "We were awful to you, I know that, but I am young. Bryn, I have my whole life ahead of me. If the family goes down for fraud, I will be blacklisted from every industry. I just want a lifeline." "Talk," I said. "Mom has a safe," Tessa whispered, leaning in. "It is behind the false panel in her dressing room closet. The code is her birthday. Inside, there is a physical ledger, the black book." "What is in the book, Tessa?" I asked. "The real expenses," she said. "She has been skimming from the charity gala funds for 5 years. She has a gambling problem, high-stakes poker in Macau and Las Vegas. She lost $400,000 last month alone. She pulled the money from the employee pension fund to cover it." I stared at her. Theft, embezzlement. This was not just civil liability. This was prison time. "If I give you this," Tessa said, tears welling in her eyes, "you have to promise not to sue me personally. I want immunity from the civil suits." "If you testify," I said, sliding a prepared document across the table. "Sign this. It guarantees that Pinegate Capital will not pursue assets held in your personal name, provided you cooperate fully with the forensic audit." Tessa signed it without reading the fine print. She gave me the access code and the location. By that evening, my team had the ledger. The evidence was irrefutable. It detailed years of systematic looting of company assets to fund Cynthia's addiction and Winston's silence. I submitted the findings to the court-appointed overseer the next morning. The reaction was instantaneous. The bank declared a total breach of covenant. The board of directors resigned en masse to avoid liability. The Whitaker empire did not just crumble, it evaporated. 2 days later, the court judgment arrived at my office. I held the heavy paper in my hands. Order of receivership and liquidation. Because the fraud was so extensive, there would be no restructuring. The assets had to be sold to cover the debts. It is done, I said to the empty room. I looked at the final paragraph. The date for the public auction of the seized collateral was set. The Newport estate, the symbol of their arrogance, would be sold to the highest bidder in exactly 10 days. I picked up my pen and circled the date. I would be there, and I would bring my checkbook. The week before the final hearing, Graham tried to corner me in the parking garage of the Kestrel building. He looked like a shadow of the man I had married. His suit was wrinkled, his hair was unwashed, and he smelled faintly of desperate day drinking. He blocked my car door, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender that felt more like a trap. "Bryn, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I messed up. I know I did, but we can fix this. You do not have to ruin my father. You do not have to take the house. I made a mistake, but I still love you." I looked at him, searching for any spark of genuine emotion. I found none. I saw a man who was terrified of being poor, not a husband who was sorry for breaking his vows. "You do not love me, Graham," I said, unlocking my car. "You love the safety net," and I cut the ropes. He did not step aside. Instead, his face hardened, shifting instantly from begging to threatening. "Then I will fight you. My lawyer says you hid assets. You defrauded the marriage by pretending to be poor. That voids the prenup. I am coming for half of Kestrel. I am coming for half of everything." He served the papers the next morning. It was a desperate, flailing countersuit claiming that by concealing my true net worth, I had denied him the ability to give informed consent to the prenuptial agreement. He wanted 50% of my company. I sat in June Holloway's office, reading the filing. June just smiled and adjusted her glasses. He walked right into the wood chipper. June said. She pulled out the original contract and flipped to the addendum we had inserted years ago. "Here is the clause." June explained. Section 8, paragraph 3. If the petitioning party claims the prenup is void due to hidden assets, but is simultaneously found to have utilized the respondent's credit or financial leverage to facilitate an extramarital affair, the claim is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the respondent is entitled to immediate reimbursement of legal fees and assumes the right of first refusal on all marital debts. In English, June. I said. "It means the black card is the nail in his coffin," June said. "If he had used his own cash to book that hotel room for Paisley, he might have had a case to argue about your hidden wealth. But because he used the card you guaranteed the card backed by your assets, he proved that he was already benefiting from your money while cheating on you. He used your own leverage to stab you in the back. That makes the prenup ironclad. While Graham was losing the legal war, his personal life was disintegrating with even more speed. My private investigator sent over the final report on Paisley Monroe later that afternoon. Her real name was not Paisley. It was not even Sarah or Monica. Her birth name was deceptive in its simplicity, but her record was complex. She had 3 warrants for credit card fraud in Ohio and a pending investigation for identity theft in Florida. The report detailed the scene at the City Hall Registry Office that morning. Desperate to secure spousal privilege so she could not be forced to testify against him, Paisley had dragged Graham to the clerk to get a marriage license. "We need it done today." Paisley had reportedly screamed at the clerk, "Just sign the paper." But when the clerk asked for a birth certificate or a valid Social Security card, Paisley froze. She could not produce them. She tried to use a photocopy of a fake passport, but the clerk threatened to call the sheriff. Paisley fled the building, leaving Graham standing alone at the counter. According to the investigator, Graham sat on a bench outside City Hall for 3 hours, staring at the ground. He had destroyed his marriage, alienated his family, and lost his fortune for a woman who could not even tell him her real last name. He had burned down a castle to keep a hologram warm. I put the report down. I did not feel joy. I did not feel the thrill of victory. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a balanced equation. I was not interested in watching him suffer for sport. I wanted the books closed. I wanted the debt settled. My computer chimed with a new email notification. It was the confirmation I had been waiting for. Subject auction schedule and court docket coordination. The presiding judge had granted our motion to consolidate the timeline. The public auction of the Whitaker estate in Newport and the final hearing for our divorce were scheduled for the exact same date. I looked at the calendar. May 15th. On that day, Graham would lose his wife in the morning and his home in the afternoon. Let's finish this. I whispered to the empty room. I forwarded the schedule to my finance team with a single instruction. Prepare the funds. The fluorescent lights of courtroom 4B buzzed with a low, irritating hum that seemed to amplify the silence. Graham sat at the defense table, looking like a man who had not slept in 3 days. His tie was crooked, his suit jacket was wrinkled at the shoulders, and his eyes were bloodshot. His lawyer, a frantic man named Mr. Sterling, was shuffling through a stack of papers as if searching for a miracle that did not exist. I sat on the other side of the aisle, perfectly still. I wore a simple black blazer and kept my hands folded on the table. I did not bring a chaotic stack of papers. I brought a single slim binder containing the truth. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling began, his voice wavering slightly. We moved to void the prenuptial agreement on the grounds of marital fraud. Ms. Calloway deliberately concealed assets totaling in the hundreds of millions. She presented herself as a clerical worker. My client could not give informed consent to the contract because he was deceived about who he was marrying. My lawyer, June Holloway, stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Your Honor, June said, smoothing her skirt. The only fraud committed here is the one perpetrated by Mr. Whitaker. He claims he was deceived, yet the evidence shows he treated the marriage as a financial transaction. He did not care about my client's net worth until he needed to steal it. The deception is not that Bryn Calloway is wealthy. The deception is that Graham Whitaker used her credit, her signature, and her financial leverage to fund his adultery while treating her as a disposable placeholder. June submitted the evidence. The judge put on his reading glasses and picked up the documents. He looked at the invoice for the presidential suite at Harbor Crest. He looked at the transaction log for the black card. He read the text message Graham had sent me. Turn the system back on. Consider it payback for the last 2 years. Finally. He reviewed the independent audit report showing the massive revenue fraud within Whitaker Hospitality. The judge lowered the papers and looked over his spectacles at Graham. Mr. Whitaker, the judge said, his tone icy. You used your wife's credit guarantee to buy champagne for your mistress. That is a material breach of the marital fiduciary duty. The prenuptial agreement stands. You are ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the petitioner. Graham slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. Furthermore, the judge continued, given the harassment via text and the attempts to intimidate the petitioner at her place of business, I am granting the permanent restraining order. You are to stay 500 feet away from Ms. Calloway at all times. The gavel banged, a sharp crack that signaled the end of our marriage. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back, but the day was far from over. As I stepped onto the courthouse steps, the humid air hit me, along with the murmur of a gathering crowd. The local press had caught wind of the bankruptcy proceedings. The Whitaker family had tried to keep the foreclosure quiet, but you cannot hide an avalanche. Cynthia was standing near the pillars at the entrance. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had spilled wine on me just 30 days ago. Her hair was perfectly sprayed, but her lipstick was smudged, and her hands were trembling so violently she had to clasp them together. Winston was pacing behind her, shouting into his cell phone. Just need 24 hours, Winston begged, sweat running down his neck. We can refinance, do not start the bidding. Please, I am asking you as a friend. Hello, hello. He lowered the phone slowly, his face gray. He saw me standing there. You. Winston stammered. You could stop this. You could write a check right now and save us. We are family. I stopped in front of them. I looked at Cynthia, then at Graham, who had just stumbled out of the doors behind me. Do you remember what you told me the night I asked to see the wedding budget? I asked softly. You told me that if I didn't like your rules, I could leave empty-handed. Cynthia flinched. I am just following your advice. I said, I am leaving, and you are empty-handed. I walked past them, down the steps, and toward the large white tent that had been erected on the lawn of the courthouse annex. The auctioneer was already testing his microphone. The crowd was a mix of real estate sharks, curious onlookers, and journalists. The air crackled with the electric energy of a public execution. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are here to auction the property located at 12 Bellevue Avenue, Newport, along with the commercial assets of the Whitaker Resort Group. The crowd hushed. I stood at the very back, hidden in the shadow of an oak tree. I reached into my purse and pulled out a plastic paddle with a number printed on it. I was not there to watch. I was there to collect. We will open the bidding at $4 million, the auctioneer shouted. I raised my chin. My eyes were dry. My hand was steady. I waited. The bidding quickly stalled at $4.5 million. The real estate developers were whispering to each other, unsure if the property was worth the legal baggage attached to the Whitaker name. The auctioneer wiped sweat from his brow, looking for any movement in the crowd. Do I hear 4.6, he asked. 4.6 for the crown jewel of Newport. I did not raise my paddle for an increment. I raised it to end the game. $12 million, I said, my voice carrying clear and steady over the murmurs of the crowd. The silence that followed was absolute. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked, stunned by a knockout bid that far exceeded the market value but was still just a fraction of what the property meant to me. I have $12 million to bidder number 7, the auctioneer stammered. Going once, going twice. Bang! The gavel hit the podium with a sound like a gunshot. Sold to bidder number 7. The spell broke. Cynthia let out a scream that was more animal than human. She lunged toward me, her manicured claws reaching for the paperwork in my hand. You thief, Cynthia shrieked. That is my house. You cannot take it, Graham. Do something. 2 large security guards stepped in front of me, blocking her path. They grabbed her arms and held her back, creating a perfect mirrored image of the night she had ordered security to drag me out of her dining room. Let go of me, she screamed. Do you know who I am? We know who you were, I said calmly, before Graham could even step forward to defend his mother. The crowd parted again. This time, it was not for an auctioneer, but for 3 uniformed officers and a man in a federal windbreaker. They did not walk toward me. They walked straight to the woman standing next to Graham. Sarah Jenkins, also known as Paisley Monroe, the agent asked. Paisley's face went white. She tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. I did not do anything, she cried, clutching her fake stomach. I am pregnant. You cannot touch me. You are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and falsifying federal medical records, the agent said, snapping the handcuffs onto her wrists. And we know about the prosthetic. You can drop the act. Graham stood frozen, watching the woman he had destroyed his life for being read her rights. He looked at her belly, then at the handcuffs. And finally, he looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. There was no baby. There was no love. There was just a con artist who had played him, and a wife he had underestimated. Bryn, Graham whispered, taking a step toward me. I didn't know, I swear. One of the security guards stepped in his way, enforcing the 500-foot restraining order. Graham stopped. Defeated. I walked past him and stood directly in front of Cynthia. She was panting, her chest heaving with rage and humiliation. I did not take anything from you, Cynthia, I whispered. close enough that only she could hear. "I simply recovered the assets you tried to spend using my credit card. You wanted to live on my dime, now you have paid the bill." I turned to the property manager who was waiting with a drill. "Remove the sign," I ordered, pointing to the brass Whitaker estate plaque on the stone pillar. "Do not smash it. Just take it down. We are rebranding." Winston was sitting at a folding table near the auctioneer, signing the final surrender documents. He looked old and small. The black card, the symbol of their supposed superiority, was legally dead. They had no limit, no status, and nowhere to go. Graham watched me from behind the police line. His eyes were filled with tears, but they were tears of regret for what he had lost, not for what he had done. He finally understood that the moment I froze the card at the dinner table was not a pause. It was the end. I walked to my car and climbed into the driver's seat. I pulled out my phone and opened the Kestrel Meridian app. With 2 taps, I transferred the title of the Newport property and the resort chain into a new holding company. I typed a memo to my team. "Retain all lower-level staff. Initiate full forensic audit. Rebrand as Meridian Hospitality. We are going to show the world how a clean business is run. I was not going to burn the company down. That would be petty. I was going to make it successful, transparent, and profitable, everything the Whitakers had failed to do." I started the engine and looked in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw them standing on the sidewalk, Cynthia weeping, Winston slumped over, and Graham watching my car drive away. I used to beg to belong to them. I used to think their approval was the prize. Now, I said to my reflection, I choose to belong to myself. I drove out of the gates, leaving the past in the dust where it belonged. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment down below and share your thoughts on Graham's karma. If you enjoyed watching Brynn take back her power, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Mia Revenge Stories. Like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.